Sharks. They're some of the most dangerous creatures in the deep blue sea. With their powerful jaws, they're able to snap up anything that they consider to be their prey. They're speedy too, gliding through the sea with their fins, moving silently as they sneak up on their unsuspecting catch of the day. It certainly makes venturing into any shark-infested waters a risky move for anyone who's exploring the depths of the oceans. There aren't any sharks in Minecraft, or at least so it seems, but we're sure if there were, they'd be just as deadly to players as the real thing. But hold on just a minute, there are dolphins in the world of Minecraft, along with squids, turtles, all kinds of fish, and other sea life too. So what gives? Where did all the sharks go? What happened to some of the most fearsome fish in Minecraft? Did someone have some kind of grudge against the sharks that caused them to go extinct? Or did something else cause them to swim off to somewhere new? Maybe it was neither. What if somehow one of them walked away? It sounds crazy, but there are plenty of strange and inexplicable creatures living in the world of Minecraft. Zombies, creepers, skeletons, witches, withers, and of course, the legendary Ender Dragon. But what the heck is a landshark? Where did it come from? What happened to all the other sharks? And are they still out there in Minecraft somewhere? Well, why don't we take a look and find out? Searching high and low, it can be a little tricky figuring out whether the landshark was real or not. But maybe, if you spend enough time fishing in the right waters, you might accidentally stumble across your answer. How? Well, we bet you never knew that some fish can talk. Of course, they can't do it above water. You'd have to be below the surface in order to hear them. Luckily, there are a few methods you can try to breathe underwater without having to hold your breath for a really long time and risk running out of oxygen. There are several potions that you can brew to grant yourself a water-breathing buff, but this will normally only last a few minutes. If you use a turtle shell, you can breathe underwater for a lot longer, but you have to obtain 5 turtle scoots to get one of those, and that can take a while. Or if you're able to find a sunken ship in an ocean biome, then you can always construct a conduit underwater out of prismarine or sea lanterns. Once you've managed to pull that off and gotten yourself under the sea, then all you'd need to do is strike up a conversation with the right fish. But that can be tricky too. Some of them might just swim away as fast as they can at the very mention of the word shark. But if you're patient enough, then you could cross paths with a friendly fish who will be happy to tell you the tale of the landshark. Long ago, many centuries before the first explorers ever came to the overworld of Minecraft, the world was inhabited by a rich diversity of creatures. There were far more animals roaming the grass block fields of Minecraft than there were people back then. And mobs, well, they didn't even exist yet. That's right, no zombies or skeletons terrorizing everyone. Far and wide, wherever you went would be teeming with wildlife. Some that you wouldn't even find in Minecraft today. Lions, tigers, bears, and oh my, so many more. While all that was going on above ground, the same could be said underground. Cave spiders and other critters kept to their dark homes. And then there was the most exciting part of the world, underwater. Beneath the surface of the deep blue sea was almost a whole other world, filled with fish of all kind. Anything you could imagine, all shapes and sizes from little cod, salmon, and tropical fish to huge squids, dolphins, and of course, sharks. But these sharks weren't the dangers you might expect them to be. Oh no, instead, they were almost protectors of the world under the sea, looking out for everyone as they swam around the water. Everybody looked up to them. They were big and tough, a little intimidating maybe, but never rude or aggressive. And for hundreds of years, that was the way things stayed. While the overworld thrived and grew, so did the world beneath the waves. In fact, things seemed to progress a lot quicker under there than above water. The overworld's earliest people hadn't even discovered fire yet, but meanwhile the various fish had their own system for gathering food, sharing it out amongst themselves, and making sure everyone got the necessary portions. A dolphin never got more than he needed, and neither did a pufferfish. Everyone underwater knew how to work as a team, swimming alongside each other in their big shoals as they sought out food, and eventually started to learn that they could accomplish even more when they worked together. The fish began to build, and not the crude, single-night wooden huts that people in the overworld hadn't even started yet. No, they went bigger, bolder, and better. the fish were able to build themselves huge underwater cities. Thanks to the many hands, or many fins, at work, it didn't take long for the many different fish to construct a huge paradise for themselves. By the time their cities were finished, they would stretch for miles on the seabed, filled with buildings and homes unlike anything that even the most seasoned Minecraft builder could imagine in hundreds of years, and couldn't make for themselves nearly as fast. And of course, while the fish built their paradise under the water, the sharks watched over them, keeping guard and making their undersea cities even safer to live in, at least for the time being. Of course, the world beneath the waves could only hold the lead over the surface for so long. Within a few hundred years, while all the creatures of the sea were living in peace and harmony, the residents of the overworld were gradually catching up. They learned how to create fire using flint and steel, mined the caves for different stones, and chopped down trees for wood. These became some of the earliest villages in Minecraft's history, and the people that lived there, its first villagers. However, it didn't take long for these early villagers to start teaching themselves newer and much stranger skills. Some practiced magic, used dangerous spells and enchantments. Others dabbled in alchemy, gathering ingredients from the overworld to brew into potions. And once certain villagers had learned these skills in sorcery, it didn't take long for chaos to ensue. Spells were then used by some to create and cast forth the earliest mobs, raising the dead as armies of skeletons and summoning zombies so that these magic wielders could take control of the small settlements people had built for themselves. Now, villagers were forced to take shelter in their wooden homes from these monstrous mobs that were now roaming the land, commanded by witches and wizards. But before long, people started to say enough is enough. They were tired of being picked on by these bullies with their magical skills, and so started to come up with ways that they could fight back. They used the skills they'd all learned over the years, gathering resources to craft and build. The villagers learned how to make themselves armor from leather, then iron, gold, and even diamonds. They forged weapons, swords, shields, bows, and arrows, as well as new tools to make it easier to gather even more resources. They trained themselves to fight, eventually pushing back against the mobs. But even then, all they could really do was drive them back whenever some of the witches sent skeletons to ransack the villages, or if a wizard ever rode in on a horde of giant spiders. It was only temporary, and they always came back stronger, having made new weapons or armor for their minions too, leveling the playing field once again. That is, until the villagers came to one of the most important discoveries they'd ever make: how to craft iron golems. Using pumpkins that they grew in their farms and combining them with the iron they'd smelted from the metal in the mines, the villagers were able to create their very own big, strong protectors. The iron golems were able to severely weaken the armies of mobs that were being sent in to destroy the villagers, protecting their new homes and the villagers who'd make them. Eventually, the villagers were able to send their newly created iron golems to round up all the wily witches and wizards who had started all this trouble to begin with. There was a lot of arguing over what should be done about their magic-using adversaries. Should they be taken care of for good? But eventually, cooler heads prevailed, and the villagers decided not to punish the witches and wizards with cruelty. After all, if they responded with violence like that, it would make them no better than those who had unleashed mobs to take over their homes. Instead, the villagers decided they'd come up with a solution, the same way they'd created the iron golems. They decided the answer was to build something, using their skills in gathering and crafting. And so they built boats. In fact, these were huge, much bigger than the tiny rowboats anyone had made before. These were enormous ships, made to travel long distances across the sea. The villagers decided it would be best to send the wizard and witch somewhere far away to a different part of the overworld. There, with an entire ocean keeping them at a safe distance, they could fight amongst themselves with all their magical means. And so the iron golems brought the captive magic users aboard the big wooden vessels, and they set sail for somewhere the witch and wizard wouldn't be able to cause any trouble, or so they thought. Meanwhile, things in the world under the sea had been going pretty smoothly. Sharks were still in charge of safeguarding the other fish, in a pretty similar way to how the iron golems protected the villagers. But it was while the sharks were keeping a lookout for any potential dangers that they spotted something that nobody underwater had ever seen before. It was a huge, looming shape built out of wood that cast a foreboding shadow as it sailed across the surface of the water. The sharks were baffled by the sight of it. From their point of view, their entire world was under the sea, so seeing a ship for the first time was unlike anything they'd ever encountered. They rushed to tell the other fish what they'd seen, a big wooden something floating in their direction. A lot of the fish panicked, unsure what they could do if this strange craft ever made it to their underwater cities. Was this large wooden object another fish of some kind? Was it alive? Another sea creature that had come to claim their paradise for itself? There was only one thing to do. The sharks had to step up to keep their fishy friends safe. The sharks swam into action, zipping straight towards the strange vessel. Little did they realize that on board the ship were the captured wizards and witches, being watched over by the strong iron golems. From aboard, the golem was suddenly surprised to feel their ship being rocked by something outside. Teeth started chomping through the wood of the hull as the sharks made their way in, trying to sink the ship. The iron golem retaliated, fighting back against the sharks, and before long there was an all-out battle taking place on the ship. The wizard and witch got loose and were able to swim back to shore and used their spells to create even more pandemonium. The ship soon sank, taking a lot of the sharks with it. As it came crashing down to the bottom of the ocean, fish were forced to flee for their lives, abandoning their underwater cities before the shipwreck ruined them. But during the fight, a stray spell had struck an iron golem and a shark. This creature had tried to swim back home only to see the underwater paradise it had once called home destroyed, wrecked by the sinking ship. Still mostly a shark, it tried to swim after the escaping shoals of fish as they scattered, but they only seemed to speed away from it as fast as they could, out of fright when they saw it. Disheartened and dejected, the creature decided to swim further, following in the path of the wizard and witch, who were swimming back to the overworld to get their revenge for being banished. As they arrived on the sandy shores, soaking but swearing they'd get their own back on the villagers, the magical mischief makers were shocked to see something swimming through the water after them. They summoned mobs to protect them, expecting to see an iron golem climbing out of the blue to capture them and take them back to the villagers. But to the surprise of all the wizards and witches who'd made it ashore, something unlike anything they'd ever seen before rose from the depths. It stood on the land. It had been transformed into a landshark. As the frightened witch and wizard fled for their lives, the landshark used its mighty iron golem levels of strength to fight off the skeletons that had just been summoned, smashing them into nothing more than harmless piles of bones. The sharks chomped at the mobs, biting their skulls off and spitting them out, then charging after the magical pair to take care of them. However, it didn't take long for the sunlight here in the overworld to dry out the landshark's skin. The longer it was on the surface, the more tired the creature got, finding it harder to move. As the witch and wizard were getting away, the landshark felt weakened. It struggled to stomp its way back to the water, where it suddenly dived in. It needed to be underwater again, otherwise it wouldn't survive for longer than a few hours, minutes if it used too much of its golem strength. Being back under the sea, breathing through its shark gills made the creature feel rejuvenated, although it did little to ease its sorrow. According to the talking fish's story, the landshark spent most of its days traveling between the land and sea, living in both worlds, but unable to settle in either. Its fellow fish were too scared of it, as were the villagers and others living in the overworld. Some schools of squid started a rumor that they'd seen the landshark living in a cave near the ocean, where it could swim if it needed to replenish itself. But nobody, especially none of the fish, have seen it since. Who knows though, maybe the landshark is still out there, and maybe it's still in need of a friend.